especially under, really severe conditions in our city of Memphis, Tennessee. And I got my colleagues here, Representative Hardaway, my leader here, actually out of Nashville, John Ray Clement, and my other colleague over here, Bo Mitchell, came in, and we may hear a little bit from my leader in just a little bit. But I want to start off by thanking my ASME members. And Mr. President, stay with Mr. Aiden, raise your hand there. All right, and all those members up here, and Maurice, and all of Ms. Vita, all of the members here. And this man right here is absolutely, you all may or may not know him. He's one of the original men, a part of the Sanitation Department in 1868, okay, Mr. Smith, and I wanted him to be here as well. I always like to come and remind people of the struggle that we've had in this country as we continue to have today. And it started with Dr. King giving his last vision of testament in Memphis, his blood in Memphis, to come to, dignify men like this in our country. And we continue to do that today. That's the kind of fight we're fighting today with what is happening in the police department here. And all those that are here, we really thank you all for coming this morning. Now, we also want to give a shout out to certainly our love to the family, Ms. Wells, Tyre, the Nichols, his children. It's a sad thing that we have to continuously talk about this kind of nonsense in our country, but we have to express continuously our love for them and just how well her influence and the family's influence was last night on the protesters. The protesters protested, and what we're calling for today is the same thing that happened last night, the calm of the protest. You must protest, no ifs, ands, and buts about it. Protest is in order. We have to protest, but they did it in such a dignified way. You could hear the echoes, the chants of, we're going to do it like Mama said. Mama said she wanted what? Peaceful protest, okay? And that's what the young folk did, transition to giving peaceful protest, but at the same time making a point. But also what we want for this family, like we want for all these other families too, we want justice, okay? Now let me emphasize this very emphatically. It doesn't matter whether you're a black cop or white cop. We want the same thing when it comes to fair treatment in this community. We want the same thing. Everybody have to be treated properly. We want justice for this family, okay? And also I'm calling for looking deeper into this. It seems like there may be something else behind this. To me, that's my gut. I don't have any facts to say another. To jerk a man out of a car for no reason at all and commence to just giving him the beating of his life, it's like there's something else maybe lurking. So we're asking that, the TBI as well as our Attorney General look deeper to see if there's something else happening behind this. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's just not, it's kind of weird. There's some personal stuff going on, some gang stuff going on. I'm just tossing stuff out. I don't know, but I know it doesn't look right. Old folk back in the day had an old saying that said, when something smells a little fishy, okay, there may be something else there. There could be. I don't know. But we're calling that they do look for some of these kinds of things. The family obviously has to go on. We hadn't gotten with the family, but I'm going to put this out there, and we have to get with the family. The father's been taken away from that family at this particular point. The young child's dad, or if he has two children's father has been taken away. So the community needs to embrace it. We have to talk to the family to see how we might want to set something up for the child's education in the future, because we know that that baby or babies need to be educated, okay, as such as all of you all are. You wouldn't have these jobs if you didn't have a certain measure of education. So we need to do that as well. Coupled with, so we have my colleagues here, we may have to look at legislation, which we're thinking about looking at some kind of legislation that addresses training statewide, because these things happen, they seem to happen everywhere you got black men in particular. But we need to figure out what kind of training is done, what kind of training needs to be done, and if there needs to be some tweaking or what have you. I don't know yet, but I think the state needs to get involved. Hopefully my colleagues will touch bases on that at some point too, as to what it is that we need to do about the training of this behavior. There seems to be a culture is so rigid that it does not respect people, even though, and all of us know we need police officers, we need people to protect us. They're in our families, they're our friends, we grew up with them, but it seems as if people forget who the citizens are, need to be treated properly and humanely. Now, you're going to have sometimes some tough busters out there, and you got to deal with them, okay? But never should a traffic stop cause you to put on a wooden overcoat, a coffin at some point, okay? Never should that happen, okay? So we need to look at this very seriously and see exactly what it is we're going to try to do policy-wise to maybe change some of that. Now, I'm going to stop for a moment and let my colleague get in, Representative Hardaway, Chairman Hardaway, if you don't mind. And this is G.A. Hardaway.
Good morning. This is a bittersweet moment. We, of course, are mourning the loss of young Mr. Tyre Nichols. But on the other hand, we can be proud of the way that Memphis rose to the occasion yesterday, last night, and they found a way to do the peaceful protests. They found a way to make their feelings known, and in such a way that it makes me proud, makes all of Memphis proud, and gave leadership to the other cities, the other states, and the other countries who have their eyes on us and are looking to us for leadership in how we respond. And I'm so proud of our citizens, and I know that the family is proud too, that Memphis, Tennessee honored the memory of young Tyre Nichols with peaceful protests. As my colleague stated, this is a confusing time because we're getting a lot of confusion out of our administration. I've held back trying to make sure I didn't contribute to any of the potential for violence in the area. But I think we've got a grip on that now. We know what we're doing, and we have enough grown folks in Memphis, Tennessee to understand the sophisticated nature of that all of this international attention has brought upon us. But we're not getting straight answers, we're not getting full answers from the administration. I don't know why. I can speculate, but I do know that if we connect these dots in any way, shape, or form, that eventually they've got to go up. It makes no sense to have an elite, supposedly elite unit on the streets, and yet we can't figure out who that unit answers to. How was a car chase initiated when the protocols for nearly every law enforcement agency in the nation demands that you go up the ranks and notify your superior that you're participating or about to participate in a car chase? And then once the notice is given, then the superior has the option of calling it off or just monitoring and going with it until either it concludes in catching the fleeing citizen or something else occurs. But we haven't heard about the chain of command. How far up did the immediate notice go of the car chase? How far up did the notice go that there had been a violent encounter and there was an individual being transported to the hospital? How far up did it go? We don't know. The only thing we got quick turnaround on, a quick response on, was 5 officers out of 9 or 10 who we know were on the scene who received administrative discipline. There's more to the story, and I think that the citizens of Memphis and Shelby County deserve to know the whole story as soon as possible. You can't have an effective law enforcement agency operating in Memphis, Tennessee and Shelby County unless you have the trust of Memphians and Shelby Countyans. You can't get the trust of Memphians and Shelby Countyans unless you're truthful, and you can't be truthful if you're not transparent. So those are the 3 T's that we need to remember. You got to tell the truth. You got to be transparent if you want the trust of the citizens. And the only way that you're going to be an effective law enforcement agency is to have the cooperation and trust of the citizens. Now, there's one other letter that we need to speak to, and that's at R. Just a reminder to all of our citizens that we showed and led the way yesterday on how to conduct ourselves in spite of this horrendous, horrid tragedy that we're protesting. So we want to continue that. We want that R for respect. We want to respect the wishes of the family. We want to respect the memory of young Tyre Nichols, and we want to exercise our rights in a way that is responsible. So with that, I'll come back later for questions if necessary.
In just a moment, I'm going to have my leader come up and talk just briefly about potential legislation. They drove in from Nashville for this particular important press conference. I think also we need to mention that there were 10 people, officers as I understand, that were present. And with there being 10 people present, I don't know how their involvement was, but we need to look into that as well. But also, there is responsibility when you see your colleague doing wrong, you need to get involved and stop it. Shouldn't be 10 people allowing 5 people to slaughter somebody in front of their face. You couldn't do that with me if I was an officer. You know, no weapon, 140 pounds, wet, okay, already subdued. So somebody should have stepped in and told him that's enough. Cuff the man and put him in the car and let that be it. Okay, you can't stand around, and that's aiding and abetting in my mind. Okay, however, I'm not saying what the circumstances were, how far they were, how close they were, but I think that needs to be looked into. Okay, because had it stopped halfway through, the young man would probably be alive. I'm sure he would be alive, and that's just not good. We can't let our colleagues go off and go renegade and do things they should and ought not do that causes extreme harm. Come back from a you know, a whipping, but you can't come back from death. Stop it. You know, broken leg is not terminal, not final. Okay, so we want to encourage that there's their involvement when there are cases like that, they get in and get in quickly. Now, if you don't mind, Chairman John Ray, just for a hot second, you come in at my request. Okay. Now, this is one of our leaders because we're going to look at possibly legislation, so I want him to just talk about that being a leader. Introduce yourself, if you don't mind, sir.
Thank you, Representative Towns, Representative Hardaway. First of all, let me just say what an honor it is to be in this historic venue with the men and women of AFSCME who literally make this city run. Memphis is the most beautiful city in the state of Tennessee, and unfortunately we're here to mourn the ugliest of tragedies. And so I just want to say, send again, on behalf of everyone, especially the Democratic Caucus, that we send our hearts and our prayers from across the entire state of Tennessee, as well as the nation, to lift up the family of Mr. Tyre Nichols. As a father of 3 young boys, I can't fathom being this young man's mother or parents in this situation. As a direct result of this, we will continue to follow the lead, Representative Hardaway, Representative Towns, and other members of the Democratic Caucus from this community, and we will be introducing legislation. And first let me say, it's truly unfortunate that legislation is required, that we would need to legislate humanity in 2023. We have a long way to go to reach that mountaintop. We will continue to introduce legislative initiatives to that end. I will be assisting my colleagues in this endeavor, and so you will see, again, from Tennessee Democrats, legislation to try to prevent this type of thing from happening in the future. So some of the topics that have been discussed, again, we continue to battle and address the need for implicit bias training. among police officials across the state. We have seen in the past police officers or law enforcement be terminated for calls from one department in one city only to go to another city. That needs to stop. We have many different ways that we need to evaluate to address this issue. Again, it's truly unfortunate that this is even necessary, but as always, I will be following the leadership of my colleagues here in this endeavor, and once again, Democrats will be leading the charge on these very important issues. So thank you again for allowing me to join you this morning.
Thank you, Sheriff. Now, finally, I want to emphasize, we're going to open up for questions, emphasize how proud we are of the police director, how quickly they investigated and analyzed the data and terminated those guys that were on the force at that time. Right after that, just how quickly the Attorney General's office responded with indictments. I think that has a lot to do with showing and settling the nerve and quieting the anger in this community, because it was done very quickly. Within 2 weeks, that was done. That's very important. I think Ben Crump, our good friend Ben Crump, has said that Tennessee, meaning Memphis, Tennessee at this point, is real exemplary and should be used as a model of how to respond. Unfortunately, these things will happen again. We think how to respond. Memphis is exemplary. It's a model of how they should handle this kind of infraction of a citizen's right, and that, especially ends up in murder or death. So Memphis should be held in high esteem for that, but it's our director and our leader at the AG's office. And, it's something that hopefully we can continue. But under no stretch of the imagination does that conclude the matter. We want justice for this family. No ifs, ands, and buts, no substitutes. We want justice for this family, and we want it swiftly for this family. We want justice. We want and demand justice. And as I said, it doesn't matter about the ethnicity or color, okay, of the people that perpetrate or violate. We want justice. No substitute. We're not going to tolerate it. It's just that simple. Now we're going to open up and see if you all have any questions. Yes, ma'am.
When you talk about swift action, how soon could we see legislation here in Tennessee on the books?
Well, our session just started. We just restarted, okay? So we actually, if we're able and successful in being able to do something, you got to understand now, Democrats, we're only 24 of the 99. But we could see it actually by the conclusion of the session, which is like 3 or 4 months. We could actually see something if we're able to do and pass on both sides of the House. I hope that, our people in the General Assembly are sensitized to what's going on and will work with us, and I think that they will if it's presented in the right way. But we could actually see something in April or May. We really could.
You talked about 24 out of 99 here in Tennessee. It is hard for Democrats to get legislation through. Are you concerned that with this it won't happen, or do you think because of the nature of the case, like you said, it would?
Well, let me tell you what I see. This thing is so egregious. What helps us, I believe, is the footage. How can you look at that footage and not want to do something? It's there in not black and white, it's there in color, okay? This has gone around the country. I was having luncheon meeting yesterday with a guy that's out of Europe. This is all over in Europe. His wife called him and asking what is going on in Memphis, okay? It's everywhere. The president has contacted his family, offering condolences and so forth. So you would be hard-pressed to look at this footage and see what happened to that young man, okay, and not try to do something. If a dog in this country was beaten like that, what the hell would happen? You all know what would happen. Ask Michael Vick, okay? If a dog is beaten like that, somebody's going to jail. Now, you got a man that's dead. So that's something somebody else has to explain. I'm not saying we won't be able to do it. I think we will, because I've been able to do certain things, and I've been there long enough. We have a relationship. Hopefully we can get things done on both sides of the aisle, because this is definitely not partisan. It's not anti-police, because we do, as I say, have friends and family that we love, but it's about making sure that we do it right and making sure we take care of a man that really didn't do anything. They hadn't even validated a violation of a traffic stop from what the police director is saying. So I think we will. Next question. Any colleagues want
Could
to
I
jump in?
respond
Again?
to that?
Sure. Help yourself. Come in.
And as my colleague said, we'll be preparing bills, and we actually have a bill filing deadline of Tuesday. So the bills that will go forward will be filed by Tuesday. One such bill will deal with the mental health care for law enforcement officers. We want to make sure that when you're hired, that you have had a psychological evaluation and that you're suited for this job and the job is suited to you. We also want to look at establishing annual mental health evaluations so that we can do what? So that we can catch the problem before it becomes the problem of the law enforcement employee, before it becomes a problem for a citizen out in the streets. We also are contemplating whether it makes sense to have random mental health checkups. So you would come in the morning and roll call, and instead of going out on your duty, then you would go to the counselor, to the psychologist, psychiatrist, and get your checkup. So we've got that, and we've got some other things in place that we're working on, but I think that's one of the most significant. And we're also looking at the issue of whether these untrustworthy individuals, those who lie but might not receive but might not receive any firm, definable discipline, whether when those guys end up in court, whether that information needs to be divulged to the defense. So we're talking about revisiting the Brady Rule.
Chairman, you got anything? Okay. Next question.
Can you elaborate on the importance of protesting? You talked about it's important that protest after situations like this. Tell us why
Okay.
that's important.
All right, listen. This country, we know the history of this country to a large degree. All right, even though we didn't get it taught to us like we should have in high school, elementary school. Protest has changed this country. This building here, this union here, a large part of what made it a significant union around the world is because Dr. King and the members like this gentleman right here had to get out and protest for the rights. The thing about freedom and the thing about rights is that you cannot figure that once you achieve those rights, like freedom around the world, that they're going to be maintained, because there comes somebody with these old crazy ideas that try to take them away, and so you got to stand up and protest for them. That's something we should never lose in this country, the right to protest and assemble. If you do, what happens, there's a groundswell that bubbles up and erupts to something that's not really good. People always need to be able to express themselves, whether they agree with me or not. That's your constitutional right, and we need to do it. That's an expression that Americans have, and we don't need to lose it at any cost. Always exercise your right to protest. Now, sometimes things get a little rough, because the circumstances are a little rough. But under this circumstance, we are calling for, we're going to do what Mama said. Mama said she wants peace, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to give her peace. We're going to protest, but we're going to give Mama peace. She needs no more anguish. The Wells need no more anguish. Mr. Nichols' family needs no more anguish, but we want to protest. Because we don't want, under any circumstance, people to think that this is okay. This is not okay. What has happened is not okay. Come on, sir.
The City of Memphis City Council introduced 8 Canton Way a couple of years ago, and they say that is part of the reason the officers were arrested so quickly, because they violated some of those 8 Canton Way rules. Is that something that could be put on a broader level, from a state level, that all officers have to follow those rules they can do their job?
That's a part of what I believe ought to come out of this when we introduce legislation. Okay, part of the problem with our communities is when there's something like that happens somewhere in the country, okay, there's a sandbagging. The citizens don't get the information in due time. The tape gets lost. The tape is modified. There's no transparency. When you do those kinds of things, what happens is people begin to doubt, especially when there are no indictments over an extended period of time, 20 years, 40 years, 50 years. When you change it and do what we did today, what that does, that calms the nerve, that settles down the anger, that lets people figure that we can get justice at the end of the day. People want justice. They don't want any more than that. Just fair treatment, just justice. So these are excellent maneuvers that have taken place. And yes, it needs to be something that we could actually stretch across the state. We should. Okay, the circumstances are the same. We should. That law or that application, if we made it a law, that application would soothe the heartbreak, the anger, okay, the frustration. I think it's a great idea. You want to say anything, sir?
No. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. When we look at policy, we know that policy is only as good as the personnel or the people who execute it or carry it out. So we're back to the hiring practices and the management of the personnel who you've hired. So I would say that it doesn't matter what policy we put in place if we're hiring the wrong people. If we're lowering the bar and taking individuals into law enforcement who otherwise would not wear a badge, then we've got to revisit that. These are folks who we are giving permission at their discretion to take your liberty or your life. We've got to do a better job of deciding who has that authority. So yes, we're going to revisit the policies of the department. We're going to sit down with our city councilmen, and we're going to sit down with our county commissioners and talk about policy. We're going to talk about funding, who needs to kick in more dollars so that we can hire the right kind of people. We're going to talk about that. But overall, the state has a constitutional responsibility for the safety of its citizens. So the great state of Tennessee has got to give us some money so that we can help the citizens who live here, help the citizens, the tourists who come to play here, and those who work here.
And that includes making sure the guys get a raise, because police officers don't make enough money. They should be paid far more money than what they receive. You got another one, sir?
I just want to ask you all, after how this situation has been handled, do you still have confidence in Chief Davis to lead this police department?
Of course, that's a loaded question, man. Okay, of course, that has nothing to do with Chief Davis. Chief Davis didn't go out and do that. These cats are 24 years old, 32. They know better. There has no reflection of Chief Davis or many of the officers that are there. She's the one who gave us swift action. She's the one who terminated that bad behavior. Has nothing to do. She just got here. What, 18 months if she's been here that long? These problems are across the country, and they're systemic throughout our forces across the state sometimes, okay? Has no reflection on her. Let that be emphatically stressed. Yes, I support the chief. Absolutely, 100%. No diversion, no backing up, no moonwalking on it. She is doing her job from what I see right now, okay? Next question.
Well,
Come on.
Come on. We might not be completely on the same page on this. I support the chief, but I think that our scrutiny needs to go all the way up to the C-suite in City Hall. The policies, especially when you have the kind of policies that create these type of special units, are getting authorized at the top of the pyramid. So I'm going to hold and not render an opinion at this time, but everyone in the Memphis Police Department needs to be looked at, and we need that patterns of and practices review by the Department of Justice. I'd love to see the Memphis Police Department do it voluntarily, but we need it. So we don't need to pay a consultant to come into the Memphis Police Department and tell them what's wrong. We need for the Department of Justice to do its job and evaluate the patterns and practices which they probably already have far too many files on the Memphis Police Department, and some aren't that old, just a few years old. But we need that in order to ensure, going back to the T's, and that's truth, transparency. We've got to have that if we're going to have trust. And I think it's going to take someone with the arm's length of the Department of Justice. You can't pay a consultant to come in and tell you everything that's wrong with your company. If some of that involves your failures, I just don't trust having MPD pay a consultant to come in and tell us what's wrong from top to bottom. I don't think we're going to get a clear and honest story on that. I want the Department of Justice to come in and do patterns and practices review of the Memphis Police Department.
Yes, ma'am.
Just a follow-up question to that. We heard your message to the family. What's your message to those 5 officers that are now bonded out at home, other officers that are under investigation, EMT officials, and just officers around the world, as you say, who have their eyes on the city of Memphis right now?
Well, I mean, you have empathy for anybody even when they run afoul of the law. Even though those people we think are running afoul of the law, you still have compassion. I have compassion for human beings. You know, at this point, what we have to do is let the system work, and we pray for them like we do the other families, okay? It's a heartbreaking situation. There's no pleasure in any of this at all. There's losers on all sides. It's sad, but what really breaks my heart is the fact they were so young, and they know that those are the kinds of things that other young African-American men experience in the community. Okay, but still, there again, you know, if that was my friend or my cousin or my brother, this and another, I have the same concern for that particular human being, even though they've done something bad, okay? That's what you call being a human being, you know? So we have to pray for them, too. It's not one-sided. It's not unilateral. Next question. Yes, sir.
You mentioned more questions and answers earlier about the unit, about circumstances of how this happened, things like that. What are you expecting to get those answers?
Well, let's restate it. Let me make sure I understand you. Say it again, please.
You mentioned questions about the unit, about the circumstances of how this happened.
Right.
You mentioned pushing for those answers. I know it may take a little bit of time. What are you expecting to hear things?
Well, these things, first thing I would have to do is the things that I have suggested here, we make sure that Steve Morrow, the Attorney General, gets to those things. And, you know, obviously we can't dictate to them. You want it to be thorough and let it run the process. I wouldn't put a time limit on their office. But he knows as they expedite this particular deal, they'll do it in a respectful manner. They got to analyze it. That's not my job to go in and research, but I have to pose and ask them to look into these kinds of things. There could be something there. There may not be anything there. I don't know. It just sounds fishy and kind of peculiar. It's just something that does not sit right in the good old gut, you know. So if they can figure it out, they give us some feedback on it, hey, sometime reasonably, and I'm sure he will. It's not like he doesn't have enough on his plate right now. But, I can't put a time frame on it. But, you know, I'm not talking about a year, 6 months, nothing like that. Okay, I'm sorry. Next question. I thought I saw another hand. Yes, sir.
A lot of incidents start traffic stops. In your opinion, should police be involved in making traffic stops still?
Well, look, that question has come up. I think that the time could be better utilized. We have about 600, I think, 50 people, cops, officers short, okay? And there's real crime going on in our city, like there is in other cities. If that could be relooked at and we have those traffic cops to deal with those particular kinds of things, and our officers are able to deal with the more urgent, more serious things, that may help. We still got to get the complement up. We still got to get that 650 or 500, whatever it is, up. But I think it would be better, and they're trained different. I think it would be a better use of their time. You know, but there again, I would be open to see what, the chief and the union and all those people say about it. But still, I'd rather see them out policing, dealing with gangs and dealing with drugs and dealing with, homicides and dealing with, domestic violence, that kind of stuff. I really would rather see that just personally off the cuff without analyzing it, I think it'd be better use of their time, Come on.
And I agree with my colleague, and we're actually working on legislation which will refocus our energies from merely dealing with de-escalation techniques and move us into non-escalation techniques. Some of that will be about how you talk, how you posture when you're interacting in the field. Critical part of that is just what Chairman Towns talked about, and that's whether we need to make all of these traffic stops that we're making. So we need to collect data, analyze it, and make a decision on whether the chances of violence and thus the chances of injury or death to both the citizen and to our law enforcement officers, whether that's justified for the effectiveness of these random stops. And when we do the stops, do we have to take folks to jail for nonviolent offenses? I would suggest to you, no. And the arrest procedure is another point where we seem to have violent encounters between the citizens and the law enforcement in the field. So I'm with my colleague on that. We've got to move ahead and take that next step and advance the discussion past de-escalation into non-escalation techniques. If you don't get to the escalation point, ain't nothing to de-escalate.
Many of the traffic stops should result in just a ticket, if anything. I mean, you don't want your high-paid officers to say we got them a raise out being responsible for tickets. That's like a tariff, raising taxes with ticket. And some of these municipalities, they do it when you drive through there. You don't want that. Their time could be better utilized, I think, and more effective for us as citizens when you got real problems in our community. Next question. We'll take two more. And no, it's a Saturday. I want you guys to like us after this over. I'm going to take the whole Saturday, you know. Is that it? Okay. Thank you all for coming. As again, hey,
Thank you,
sadly,
everyone.
out of these circumstances, but, you know, thank you all very much.
Did y'all have anything, Brian?
I don't think you guys.
Well, we do have additional comment from labor.
Okay. The women said no.
Oh. Okay, give me just a second. Hardaway. Did you want to go? Yes.
No, hold on, guys. Okay. All right.